First Sunday of the year, we're thinking about our strapline of our vision, which is lives being transformed. And what I want to do this morning is just share where I've been over the last few months, really. If you think that's self-indulgent, then please forgive me at the end of it, if you're able to. I believe that lives being transformed is something that largely in the church we talk about when things are going well. Who here does not love that powerful testimony at a baptismal service of a life turned completely around, washed up on Plymouth shoreline from being in the Navy, recovered from drugs, etc., etc. And I'm not mocking that. We love those stories. And we love the quieter ones, don't we? Of someone who's always known God's love in their life and is now being baptised. It's easy to see lives being transformed in those situations. It's harder to see lives, our lives, being transformed in those winter periods. Those periods when life is dormant, not dead, but not flourishing and growing. I've done next to nothing in my veggie patch for 2 months now. It's glorious because it's just all laying there. There's no weeds growing up. There's no squirrels digging for things that aren't there. I just leave it, but I know that it will flourish again at some point in the future. But at the moment, it's dormant. It's wintering, to use a word. I discovered a book by a lady called Catherine May. It's called Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. And in it she says this: here is another truth about wintering. You'll find wisdom in your winter. And once it's over, it's your responsibility to pass it on. And in return, it's our responsibility to listen to those who have wintered before us. And it's an exchange of gifts in which nobody loses. So what's been happening to me over the last few months? If you're not part of the church family regularly, this will be new to you. I've been on reduced hours for a couple of months, up to 3 days a week, because of the stress that I've faced. And it all started to become aware in me when I was talking to a fellow minister friend who'd put a comment on a private Facebook page for ministers, and I thought, I'm not sure he's in a great place. So we chatted, and I said to him at the end of our conversation, which was over an hour online, I really think you should go and see your doctor. I said, please, just go and see your doctor. If your doctor says you're fine, then ignore me, but please do. He went and saw his doctor, and his doctor signed him off work for a long period of time. We chatted again a couple of weeks later, and we've continued to. But as I chatted to him the second time, I thought, I can feel some of what's going on in him, in me. So I do that bloke thing and ignore it. Do I do that English thing and get a stiff upper lip? Or do I address it? I ignored it and put on a stiff upper lip, because that's what I sometimes do. And I went to see the biography film of Bruce Springsteen with a friend, where he has a complete breakdown in his early 30s. And I came out of that film and we went to watch it at 10:30 in the morning. It was a bright, sunny day, and I came out crying. And you could see the welcomers thinking, well, he doesn't want pick a mix, does he? Let's just keep out of his way while he leaves the cinema. And I chatted with my friend outside, and she was lovely to me and just said, you know, I'm carrying, I feel, a lot. And she just hugged me and said, yeah, you are. We had half term as a family. It was great. We joined Leeds Castle. If you go once as a family but pay an extra few quid, you can go for the whole year. It was a wonderful day. I went to watch Arsenal in the Champions League with my oldest daughter Megan, who's 22. We had a great meal together. We chatted. I met her at work. The guy on the welcome desk let me come in and sit there, which embarrassed Megan. Why are you in here? Why aren't you waiting outside in the rain? And then I went on the Sunday with Noah to watch another Arsenal game. He'd just come down from Manchester to watch the game, which annoyed the rest of the family. Why can't he come the extra few miles to Tonbridge to see us? I said, he's doing the important thing. He's watching Arsenal, leave him be. And I remember we were stood in the pub. It was a 2:30 kickoff. We were stood in a pub afterwards before we were going to go out and have something to eat. And he was talking to me passionately about fasting. And he said, Dad, what's the right biblical view of fasting? Because it seems to me that a lot of Christians do it legalistically. In the church I was at where we were taught about it, it just felt like another thing forced on us. But I want to get these things right. And as he talked to me passionately about his faith in Jesus as a 20-year-old at uni, I thought, you've got something at the moment that I have just not got. I feel dry. And your passion excites me and irritates me. It excites me because I'm proud of you, but it irritates me because I've just not got it at the moment. There's not massive sin in my life. There's just I sat down with my PA, Helen Sherkle, who organises much of my life on the Monday after half term. We have a weekly meeting. And she said, how are you? And I said, I'm tired. And she, you know when you say something and there's more to that phrase that you've been holding in like a dam? And she looked at me and she cocked her head, you know, like dogs do when they sense there's a rabbit nearby and they want to get it. And she said, well, I don't think you should be feeling tired if you've had such a good week off. And I said, I know. She said, right, that's it. You're going on a 3-day retreat. I didn't know if I wanted to, but I was told. It was like being with an abbess in a nunnery. And so I spent 3 days reading, walking, praying, crying, laughing, talking, listening. I was heading towards burnout, which really annoyed me because I thought I was stronger than that. I knew lots of ministers who had led their churches through conversations like the one we had last year and had got fried. And I wasn't going to do that because I'm better than that and stronger than that and younger than them and more handsome than all of them. Don't tell them that, they'll be offended. Refuel is a book that the Atkinsons gave me and they said I could keep it. And in it, Kate Middleton says, the root of burnout is simple, doing too much for too long. Highlighted that line. I thought, that makes sense. And although it is simple in that phrase, it's far more nuanced, isn't it, for any of us who have struggled with mental health challenges in any way, shape or form. It lands differently at each of our doors according to our upbringing, our spiritual outlook, our age, where we are in life, all of those things. I went for lunch a few months later with my brother-in-law. I found it interesting that lots of people said, oh, I'd really like to catch up with you, Neil. And my immediate reaction was, thank you, that's really kind, but I just can't cope now because I don't know what I'll say or how I'll act. So I put everyone on hold for a little while, and I don't think that was wrong because I needed to get my thoughts together. And when having lunch with my brother-in-law a few months later, I said I just got into a phase where I just had this illogical thinking. I would worry and panic about the simplest of things. What shall I have for breakfast? Shall I have that or that? What shall I cook for tea? But if I do that, then I'm using the carrots that we were going to use tomorrow. So can I do that with that? And all of these silly little phrases and thoughts were running around my head. I'd painted half the kitchen because I saw a bit of it was stained. It's white, so I painted the white bit. I stepped back and I thought, well, that's no good. The rest of it looks lousy now. So I started painting the next bit. I stepped back and I thought, well, now the ceiling looks lousy. So I started painting the ceiling and I got half the kitchen done. And when I went to that football match with Megan on the Wednesday evening, I was worrying because I'd put in my diary for the Thursday, paint the rest of the kitchen. But I thought, I don't want to paint the rest of the kitchen tomorrow. And so I said to Megan, does it matter if I paint the kitchen next week and not this week? And she looked at me like, what are you on? And just said, no, it's fine, Dad. But I was in that headspace where I needed a 22-year-old daughter to tell me it's okay to not finish painting the kitchen. When we started our conversations last year in February, I knew that could be difficult. And I knew that many churches had split completely because of the way their leaders led that. The churches that split were churches where the leaders, whether they were the ministers or the elders, were extremely bullish and were just saying, this is what we're going to do, like it or lump it, get on board. And it broke those churches. And I thought, I cannot do that. I must lead with dignity and grace. And so in my head, looking back on it now, I think it's wrong. In my head, I thought, right, each Sunday is going to be like the round of a boxing match, where I'm not going to throw any punches at all, but I will have my defences up so that if punches get thrown at me, I can respond graciously. Whether it's a punch from an email in the week or a punch from that Sunday. Truth is, not many Sunday punches came. You lot were brilliant, gracious, mature, frustrated in some ways, but blimmin' brilliant. But every week I would come in like that, thinking, hold it together, don't lose your rag even if somebody else does, lead the church graciously. And when the discussion finished, I still had this up. Thinking, I know some people are thinking, do we stay or do we leave? I need to be gracious for them. And actually what I needed to do was move from the boxing ring with my defences up to the family campfire. Because that's what we are, a family. And I struggled to move from the boxing ring to the campfire because I'd got on those ridiculous shorts, huge gloves and ridiculous boots. And I was freezing because we sat around a campfire and you'd all in my head got coats and gloves and scarves on like now. And I'm there in that ridiculous stuff looking like the worst impersonator of Rocky you've ever seen in your life. No wonder I didn't feel comfortable. No one's fault here. Maybe mine in here, if we want to blame anyone, that is. And what I realised in those 3 retreat days was that I had subtly and not deliberately, I think, drifted a bit from God in 2025. I'd used God for my purposes to keep me together, rather than worshipping God because God is God. I'd gone from a completely loving relationship to almost a legal clause to get the church through the conversation. Talking about it with my spiritual mentor, who I chat with every 4 to 6 weeks, he said to me, the antidote to sin is not holiness, it's always grace. What does that mean? Neil, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Church, be kind to ourselves. Don't beat ourselves up. It's not wishy-washy to major on grace and love in a world that wants vengeance and revenge. In fact, it's the gospel antidote. In this time, I read a poem by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I was sat by our Christmas tree in our lounge. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. I was singing of freedom whilst caged by myself. I met with Andy Matheson, our Chair of Trustees, and Steve Cole, our Chair of Elders. They've said I can share this. And we went for a walk around the park, and it was all perfunctory and nice. And then we came back to my study and we sat down, and they said, "How are you doing?" And I got emotional, and I just said, "I think I've just let people down, moving to reduced hours, not keeping it together." And Andy Matheson just peered at me in that way that a bald Yoda would, and said, "Who have you let down?" And I said, I've let down my dad. I miss my dad. Gone 6 years. He said, "Really?" I said, "I've let down you two. You guys have walked with me this year. You've prayed for me. You've encouraged me. Not let us down. Let down my family." Remember when I apologised to Jo at the start of this on a text, "Sorry, I've let you down." When I got home, she tore me off a shred in a loving way and went, "What do you mean you've let me down? What are you talking about?" "I've let down our church." "You've not let down our church," they said. And the tears in Andy's eyes reflected the love that he and Steve had for me. I let you know what I was going through at the beginning because it's easy to hide. And I'm not saying that we should all do what I've done in a church context. But I felt as your leader, who you voted for about 10 years ago, whether you like it or not, I should be honest and upfront. There's too much hiding in the world and it's tiring. And so I shared that email with you about where I was at a few months ago. And there were 3 responses from you as a church. First one was, "Do you need to be off work entirely?" Not saying you should, Neil, but just if you want to, do that. The second response was, "Don't come back too early." One person said to me, "My dad was a minister of a church. It grew from 5 people to just under 100. He was in a similar position to you. The doctor told him to take reduced hours. He didn't and ended up being signed off for 2 years. Neil, please don't come back too early." And the main thing I heard from you was, "We love you." Really powerful words from people who've known me since I was a kid to people who've trundled through the door in the last year or so. I have been loved at TBC. I came across in that book a long quote that I'll read to you from Catherine May. She talks about wintering and she says, "The dropping of leaves by deciduous trees is called abscission. It occurs on the cusp of autumn and winter as part of a cycle of growth, maturity and renewal. In spring and summer, leaf cells are full of chlorophyll and bring bright green substance which absorbs the sunlight to fuel the process that converts carbon dioxide and water into starch and sugar that allow the tree to grow. But at the end of the summer, as the days grow shorter and the temperatures fall, deciduous trees stop making food. In the absence of sunlight, it would be too costly to maintain the machinery of growth. The chlorophyll begins to break down, revealing other colours that were always present in the leaf, but which were masked by the abundance of green pigment, oranges and yellows. At the same time, other chemical changes take place to create red pigments. The exact mix is different for each tree, sometimes producing bright yellows, oranges and browns, sometimes displaying as reds or purples. The trees put on their autumn display. But while this is happening, a layer of cells is weakening between the stem and the branch. This is called the abscission zone. Gradually, it severs the leaf from access to water, and the leaf dries and browns, and then in most cases falls off either under its own weight or encouraged by wintry rains and winds. Within a few hours, the tree will have released substances that heal the scar that the leaf has left, protecting itself from the evaporation of water, infection, or the invasion of parasites. But even as the leaves are falling, the buds of next year's crop are already in place, waiting to erupt again in spring. Most trees produce their buds in high summer, and the autumn leaf fall reveals them, neat and expectant, protected from the cold by thick scales. We rarely notice them because we think we're seeing the skeleton of the tree, a dead thing until the sun returns. But look closely, and every single tree is in bud, from the sharp talons of the beech to the hoof-like black buds of the ash. Many trees also display catkins in the winter, like the acid green lamb's tails of the hazel and the furry grey nubs of the willow. These employ the wind or insects to spread pollen ready for the new year. The tree is waiting. It has everything ready. Its fallen leaves are mulching the forest floor, and its roots are drawing up the extra winter moisture, providing a firm anchor against seasonal storms. Its ripe cones and nuts are providing essential food in this scarce time for mice and squirrels, and its bark is hosting hibernating insects and providing a source of nourishment for hungry deer. It is far from dead. It is, in fact, the life and soul of the wood. It's just getting on with it quietly. It will not burst into life until spring. It will just put on a new coat and face the world again in spring. Life goes on abundantly in winter, and this is where changes are made that usher into future glories. I felt like that tree. And when I was sat with Andy and Steve said to me, "Neil, you read loads of books, and you read loads of books about people who go through dark seasons in their Christian faith. And my challenge, my encouragement to you is don't rush through this season too quickly. Don't try and get fixed before God has done in you what God wants to do." Sometimes the temptation is to rush on when God says, "Actually, I'm doing some deep things with you if you allow me to. Please stop and listen." In Romans 12, verse 12, Paul says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer." The Message transliteration, I think, fleshes it out. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Be alert servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. One of the main changes for me in this season has been prayer. God, I feel, has called me deeper in prayer. Not deeper as in I'm really spiritual, but spend a bit more time reflecting. I found one prayer app really helpful. It's a Catholic app called Pray As You Go, which gives you 10 to 15 minutes a day where you can pause and listen with God to Scripture and prepare for the day. You've probably got your own way already, but if not, I'd encourage you to download that free app, Pray As You Go, and give it a whirl. I've been seeing a therapist in this time. He's been really helpful. And in one of our sessions, he said to me, "Neil, what does TBC mean to you?" And I said, TBC means to me, after pausing for a while, it's the place where me as a 5-year-old boy came and was accepted as part of the family, where I was loved. I wasn't particularly good at table tennis. I wasn't good at any musical instruments. There was nothing about me that would put me on a pedestal to be loved. I was just loved because that's what this church seemed to do. And I never got it out of my system. Jamie Oliver, in Chef's Table, The Legends, said, "Communities and countries are defined by how you treat your most vulnerable. It's your legacy." In this period that I'm still in, I have been vulnerable. And I would suggest that your legacy is that you've loved me. When I write my autobiography, which will be 1,242 pages long, very boring, there will be a chapter on how you've loved me in this period. We can take that for granted if we're not careful. And yet it's so simple and so important. By this will all people know that you're my disciples, said Jesus, if you have love one for another. I've shed some leaves in this personal winter, like those trees. And I'm not there yet. This weekend's been a battle. But by God's grace, I'll get there. And I'll live out Romans 12:12. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer.